Hi, and welcome to this live coding session on the topic of AWS Cloud Development Kit. So what today we'll be trying to build a serverless application using AWS CDK. Hope you like a lot of terminals and a lot of Vim, because that's what you're going to see. Let's get into it. This is the demo part of our, this is the actual live coding part of this session. So this is, I guess, what you came for. And this is the live coding serverless with CDK, right? We're going to be talking about Cloud Development Kit and building a serverless application with it. So first of all, what is CDK? It's AWS's Cloud Development Kit. So it's an infrastructure as code framework that allows you to build your, infrastructure as code using let's say general programming languages. So you can use things such as JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java, C# and F# to describe or basically code your infrastructure. And what CDK will do, it will take all of that written in a general programming language, do some magic to it, actually use CloudFormation in the backend to create basically CloudFormation's stacks and change sets, and then deploy your infrastructure onto AWS. Pretty neat feature, very easy to work with, especially if you're coming from a world where you know one of these programming languages. So you're able to use all the benefits of these languages to help you properly create infrastructure as code. So think of things such as loops, conditionals, and even reading off disks. So today we're going to be trying to build a serverless application with CDK from scratch. So basically start out with a blank slate. I have a lot of things I'm going to paste in, so expect a lot of that because you don't want to watch me just type for 30 minutes. So let's kick it off. So first thing you need to do, you need to install CDK if you do not have it already installed. So to install CDK, you require npm or node package manager. So it's npm install-g AWS-CDK. So this will install CDK on your machine. In this case, it will not, because I need to do sudo because it's installing it globally. Now, that's not my password. Once again. And yeah, it's working now. So it's going to install CDK globally. Now I have it already installed, so I could have skipped this, but if you do CDK -version, it should show you which version you're running. I'm running version 1.35, which is the latest version at the end of April 2020. All right, now since we have confirmed that we have CDK installed, let's create a directory where our CDK application will sit. So mk there, I'm going to call it CDK serverless fun times because I think it's fun. But before we continue, I want to just mention a few things. When you use CDK, you can take advantage of templates. So templates are basically the way CDK generates some folder structure for you, or generates files that you need if you're going to do an app, if you're going to do a library, or if you want to just create a sample application. So to get a list of those templates, you can just do CDK init and then --list, and this will show you all the available templates with the languages it supports, right? We're going to be using app today, not sample app. We're going to just create a blank app as well. So let me cd to this directory. So CDK init an app, and I'm going to use TypeScript, language TypeScript, not because I think TypeScript is the best language to use here. It's just the one I have most experience with when it comes to CDK. Any language can be used as well that is supported. So this will basically run npm install a whole bunch of packages coming from node package management. It will create the required templates, files, all the things you need to kind of kick it off with CDK, right? So it creates this skeleton structure of your application directory. And at the end of the day, it spits out this useful command such as npm run build, where you actually compile your TypeScript to JavaScript, because you need to compile TypeScript to JavaScript. You can use CDK deploy, which, it deploys some diffs, maybe get some changes in your stack, and synth, which is basically having CDK synthesize or create CloudFormation templates out of this one. So that's cool. So if we look at our directory here that we are in, we see a bunch of files. We see, package.json, tsconfig, cdk.json, readmes, bins and libs, and node modules, right? We're going to be focusing mostly on the bin and lib directories. In the bin directory, we have a file called cdk serverless funtimes ts. This file basically contains our definition of an app and our definition of a stack. Now, just taking a step back here, when we talk about CDK is split into three things in this hierarchical model. So On CDK, you create apps. Apps contain one or more stacks, and stacks contain one or more resources. And resources are basically the AWS resources or constructs you create using CDK. So again, in this case, I'm just creating one app with a single stack, which might change as we go along. All right, so, but I'm not gonna work on this file right now. I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna create a Lambda function, which is the core of serverless, right? So that's where you start. So to create a Lambda function, you edit your file here called CDK serverless funtimes-stack.ts. In this file, this is where the code that defines your stack goes, right? This is where is the meat and potatoes of your application. But before I do anything with Lambda, I need to install the module coming from NPM that supports Lambdas. So let me do this, and I'm just gonna open up a new terminal here. I'll move into Fish, and NPM install dash, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do AWS CDK Lambda, right? So this will install the AWS Lambda module within the current directory. So it doesn't have to have a global installation, so it's installing it locally in that lovely node modules folder. So once this is done, it's fine. So once this is done, I can just copy and paste this, call it Lambda, and then move on here and call it AWS Lambda. So I have imported my Lambda module to be used in this stack. Okay, so before I continue, on writing the actual Lambda code, I want to do some spring cleaning, right? I like to define variables that define some certain things down the stack, right? So I don't, like for example, some properties of resources, I would like to define them on the top of the stack as variables, so it's easier to look at. So one of the things I want to pass to my Lambda functions is a bunch of environment variables. So let's create a variable called Lambda vars, Lambda vars, and I'm gonna do a table name. You see, I may use DynamoDB later on, and I'm going to call it table name. Well, I'm going to use the variable name table name later on. So to do this, I'll just do that again like that, and call it var table name, and I'm going to call it CDK users, right? So this is going to be a table of our users. That's very cool. And that's it, right? So far, I'm going to be calling this var, not val. Like that. So this should be fine. Table name, that looks good. Okay, on to creating our Lambda function. So this is where here be Lambda. Okay, cool. How do we create a Lambda function? Well, const welcome Lambda. So we're giving a name to our Lambda function, and we're going to create a new Lambda function, right? Or sorry, new Lambda function. And we are going to be doing it within this context, and we're going to call it just hello handler, right? Hello handler. So we're going to create like a hello world Lambda script that just says hello, nothing special. We also want to define some properties here. So let me just do that, close this off before I forget, like so. And let's do some properties. So runtime, right? We need to define runtime of our Lambda function, which language our Lambda is going to be written in. So I can just do lambda dot runtime dot node.js 10x underscore x, like that. So that's the runtime defined. I want to define my Lambda code. So code, and just write code. No, you don't write code here. So I'm going to actually read code from an asset, a CDK asset, which we're going to create in a bit. So code, lambda.code, code, and then from asset, and just going to call it Lambda. So basically, it's going to take a code from the directory Lambda within our application. So it's going to take this specific code and put it within our Lambda function. So last but not least, or not even last, right? I need to do a few more things. Environment. You remember me wanting to pass our environment. You will remember want me to pass some environment variables. So instead of let's just do this, I'll just is it that? Yeah, sorry, it's that. Then pass Lambda vars. That's cool. And finally, I need to specify the handler. Basically, this think of it as what file name it's going to be using from the Lambda directory. And I'm going to call it hello.handler. Now, in essence, what this will do, it will create a Lambda function with the Node.js 10 runtime. It will take the code from the directory within my CDK directory called Lambda, and it will look for a file name called hello.js. And it will pass the Lambda vars from coming from here. Now, if I did everything correctly here, and I go down here, and I mk0 Lambda, and then what I do here is edit a Lambda and hello.js, and I'm just gonna paste some code here. This code is, again, some very simple hello world code. So I said paste to be sure, and then insert and that. So this will just say hello and welcome to our serverless application. Super simple, nothing special. If I've done everything correctly, and I think I did, and that could be just famous last words, I could go down here and do npm, or not npm, yes, npm run build. And this should hopefully compile our TypeScript code into JavaScript. It didn't. Lambda function, okay, so typos, yay. Lambda. Oops. That's fine, lambda. Does this all look good? Lambda. Import as lambda. That looks fine, yeah. Lambda code, lambda vars, lambda asset, lambda. Let me have a look. Lambda, that's fine. So once again, npm run build. I think I have one more error. Welcome. Lambda is not a valid meta property for new. Oh, did I make a mistake? What did I do wrong? Sorry. I have a dot here, right? So let me just go back and fix that like so. It's not lambda.new, it's new lambda.function. There you go. Again, npm run build. Awesome. So once that is done, we have our Lambda function built. So if I do CDK deploy or CDK diff, it should return basically everything. We're creating, in essence, a Lambda function and an IAM role. So CDK deploy will deploy this as a stack that will ask me, hey, I'm creating some potential IAM statement changes and policy changes just for security reasons. Have a look. Yes, that's fine. So what it does now, it generates a CloudFormation template and it creates a CloudFormation change set. And in turn, if I go to my CloudFormation console right now, at one point, this should show up here if I refresh it. Yeah, so it's creating right now my stack. So it's creating a few things. There's going to be a bunch of resources created as well. Again, it takes a moment or so, right? It still relies on CloudFormation. So we need to give it a minute for this to be created. Now, while this is happening, let me actually just jump back into my code. So while that is happening, I wanna do something else. So let me say about this. I want to edit my my stacks, right? So you see here that I create one app and one stack. In the best of cases, you want to have multiple stacks. You want to have a stack for production and a stack for, let's say, staging. So how can we create two stacks? Well, like that. So that's basically what it boils down to. So we just want to give this stack a different name. I'm going to call it one prod CDK or prod CDK. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to call this one staging CDK. Cool. And basically, this would create, in essence, two identical stacks of the same code. But let's add more. Let's add some features to this, or let's add some extensibility. Let's add basically properties to this. Okay, so do that, and let me just make this a bit nicer, and let's call it prod true. Right? I want to set a variable called prod to true in this case, and I also want to set some environment variables. So env, and I want to do like a region, right? So region and I'm going to do EU West 1. Close that down, make it a bit nicer, and actually like this, make this a bit more nicer, like so. Cool. So what we have done here now is I have set up the variable prod to true, and I have set up an environment variable of region to EUS1. In essence, what this will do, it will launch this region, this stack in this region. I could have done something like this, and no matter what my local settings are, this will override it. Let's add this thing as well to this. So copy like that. Sorry, no. Let's go here and then paste. Okay, cool. So this will not have a prod of true, it will have a prod of false, because this is not a production environment. Let me just go back, like so. This looks all good. Yeah, that's fine. So right now what we have done is we have created 2 stacks in essence. Well, we have created the structure for 2 stacks. Let me go back here and just have a look at my CloudFormation code, and as you can see, it has deployed. If I go to resources, you will see that I have a Lambda function created here. This Lambda function, in essence, is just a blank Lambda function, not a blank, a hello world Lambda function that you've seen before. And you can also see that I passed the variable called table name to CDK-users. Pretty cool. Before I continue, I want to delete this stack because this stack is no longer needed. Now, I could have done that through CDK, but since I've changed stacks, that would require me to change them back again, and I don't want to do that. So let's work with this. Let's enhance what we have on our library, or basically our infrastructure code. So let's go lib, edit the lib file, and it's the same one as before, right? So the thing we have to do is we need to import, or basically create an interface for the prod variable we did before. So for this variable, we need to create an interface which is going to be in this library. So let me paste some code here, like that, and I want to do this and set, not that, I'm going to set, no, please, set, come on, set, paste, yes, like that, that's fine. And I just need to change one more thing here, and instead of CDK stack props, I'm going to do env stack props. Awesome. Cool. Now this is going to be taken in, the prod variable can be taken in over by the stack. Okay, so what do we do with that? Let's actually use these variables as part of this entire story. So if I do this, I can just do it like this. If props, and where are you? Props.prod equal true, right? Then we're going to move this like that, and come on, insert, and so, right? Else, we can take this, and wabam. So now we have 2 sets of variables for our production environment, or we can do prod like that, prod, and we can do staging like so, right? So depending on if the prod is true or false, we're going to be using a different set of variables. This is a very easy way to do things such as, different kinds of capacities, or read capacities, or concurrency in Lambda functions, or even using different tables depending on which environment you use. It's super simple, and I'll show you how we use it. One more thing I want to add here as well, because I want to create an API gateway now, because that's kind of the next logical step, is I'm going to do var API gateway name, right? I want to change a different name to API gateway. I'm going to call one prod, API GW CDK, let's call it like that. And just and paste here. Awesome. So what do we need to do? We need to create a Lambda function, or sorry, an API gateway. So let's do that. API gateway GW. Awesome. So again, instead of me typing, let me just paste a bunch of things. I'm going to create my API gateway, do it like that, and do that. Cool. So this will create a new REST API gateway with the API gateway name defined in the variable table. To have an API gateway working with Lambda functions in this case, we need to create a Lambda API gateway integration. going like that. If I just paste this in and move them a bit back, like that, or undo, that's fine. So this basically creates an integration between the API gateway created here and the Lambda function called welcome Lambda, and it basically creates a new method get for the hello resource within my my serverless application, or my API gateway. So let me save this. And now, if I did everything correctly, this should work. If I do go back here and do npm run, actually, let me do this full screen, npm run build. What did I miss? I missed adding my API gateway module, right? So I need to do this, API JW, right? And also I need to install that. So npm install API gateway, right? Again, the same thing we did with Lambda functions. I just need to add the API gateway module because we need to tell CDK what to use in this case. So again, save this, go back and zoom in, and again, npm run build. Excellent. CDK deploy. Let's deploy this. Oh wait, I have multiple stacks. Oh, CDK list. Both prod and CDK staging. Wow, that's cool. Let's deploy staging, right? CDK deploy staging CDK. Now, what this does, it takes the CDK staging stack and deploys that with the given parameters I've set up in my libcode. These are again IAM policy changes and things related to security. So it gives, invoke function capabilities to the API gateway to invoke my Lambda function. So if I do this, yeah, that's fine. Again, the same like before, it's going to create a new stack here called staging CDK with a whole bunch of resources that allow it to, well, basically create, well, it's going to be an API gateway with a Lambda function that we can invoke locally. So once this is done, it takes a moment or so to do this. While we're waiting, actually, let's go back into this one. So what also can we add here? Well, I mentioned Lambda. That's a horrible name, Lambda. So, and you can see down on the lower part of the screen, you can see the CloudFormation events just scrolling up. So let's add a Lambda. Let's add a DynamoDB table because that's kind of the part we also missed. So let's DynamoDB like so, and let me again paste my DynamoDB stuff. I have this already prepared, so I also need to do something else before I continue. And like that, and move this to that. Okay, cool. So here's the thing. We had created a DynamoDB table called, well, we're going to give a partition name key called name. We're going to give the table name we define. We want to define some read capacity to it. And we also want to set the billing mode to provision. So read capacity is something we need to define in here. So let's call it var. How did we call it? Let me have a look. DynamoDB or DB read write, right? And I'm gonna set up a number, something like 200. Don't use 200 in testing. It could be a lot. And I'm gonna do 5 in staging, right? So I set up these things. Now, I've created a DynamoDB table. That's all it takes to create a DynamoDB table within CDK. One more thing I want to add here before we continue is I want to add, and this is one of the things that really stuck out with me when it comes to CDK, is the simple way it integrates with Lambda functions and DynamoDB tables and anything. So I created a table here, and to give permissions for a specific Lambda function to do something on that table, I can just do table.grant read data, and then just give it a function called welcome Lambda, and that's it. So in this case, not grant, but grant read data. I'm giving this table, or I'm giving this Lambda function called welcome Lambda the permission to read the data off this thing. Excellent. Now, taking a step back. this is finished. If I have a look at this URL here, right? So this is the output URL of our API gateway. If I do curl and just do hello, hopefully, hello and welcome to our serverless application. So we have our API gateway deployed that is integrated with a Lambda function that in turn returns hello and welcome to our serverless application. It took that much, right? Now, if I go back to this one, and I've made some changes here. Let's see if these changes should work now. So if I do that, and if I do npm run build again, and everything works. Copy pasting doesn't work all the time. DynamoDB table, right? What did I miss? Again, npm install, right? DynamoDB. I need to install the module again. And the same thing happened before, but I need to add it like so, and DynamoDB, and then go to the end. Awesome. npm run build. Let's see how this works. Hopefully now it's fine. Famous last words. Awesome, that's fine. And if I do CDK diff, it's gonna tell me that something's gonna change, right? My stack is gonna have a Lambda function being changed because of the it's gonna add a new table, it's gonna add a new policy, and the Lambda function is gonna be changed by adding a new default policy to that. So CDK deploy staging CDK will actually do this. So you see here that it's making a statement change, adding these permissions to my handler service role that's sitting behind my Lambda function. And in essence, yeah, so it will do the same thing. Of course, we're not going to wait for all of this to go ahead. But in essence, if I look at here, we can see that a new change set is happening. There's an update in progress now, which we're adding more things to this one. Well, we're adding a DynamoDB table on it. Now, to wait this out, I actually have a working case, a working example. So this is an example I've did before. And actually, there's a GitHub page that you can check out if you want. And it's available on my GitHub. And if I just do this and like that, that's the GitHub page. You can find this entire code app. So this working example has a bit more of things. It actually has just staging and prod, but it has like it has also a read and write functionality built into Lambda. So if I go to Lambda, there are a few more functions here that create users and read users from the table. So if I read a user, I think I have an example here. Yeah, so let's actually create a user. Let's do this, posts, and then like so. Yeah, so this is an example of a curl call that I'm gonna make here. And I'm gonna create a user called, let's call him Grunf, right? And this is gonna run this against my Lambda function. And now, instead of just, I can run the other Lambda function that's basically getting this, and I can do get. Yeah, this is doing the same thing. No, wait. Yeah, it's gonna get me Darko, but I don't want to get Darko. I want to get Grunf, and I can go change the name here to Darko from Grunf, right? So if I would add more information about this user, such as location, age, whatnot, you can add, it will do the same thing. So yeah, in essence, let me actually go back to this number 2. You can see that it has finished. Again, I have the same endpoint here. So if I would do the hello world, it should give me the same back. Nothing has changed from that sense. I have just created an additional DynamoDB table here, which we should be able to see in the resources somewhere. We see that there is a DynamoDB table here. Yeah, you see that? And this Lambda function has gotten permission to that DynamoDB table. All right, so thank you very much. This has been super fun to do. If you want, feel free to check out the link or the GitHub repository I've set up here if you want to try this for yourself. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of this online event. Thank you very much.